All right, now we're off and running. Welcome to SEC Football Live here on the 440 Sports Network. That is Chris Childers, friend of the pod. My name is Braden Gall, of course. Good to be hanging out with you guys here on the show. Little false start there. Kaden Proctor,
It
5-yard
happens.
penalty on the
Yeah.
the Alabama offensive lineman. Couple of notes we'll get to here. A couple of quick pieces of news I'm going to ask you about, Childers. And, of course, we have a bunch of legal news where the SEC has taken control of the sport. Yes, the SEC has completely taken control of the sport of college football. But like before, it was always in control of the sport. Now it's like legally and officially in control of the sport. What does that mean for expansion? Because it's coming, folks, and we'll tell you exactly the year that it is going to happen. So we're going to get into all of that with the new revenue distribution model, the lawsuit in the ACC. That could absolutely affect the SEC as well. But if you'd like to share the show right now, currently, while we are hanging out with you guys, or jump into the comment section, we would appreciate it. So on YouTube, hit subscribe. On Twitter, hit share. Facebook, hit share. And, of course, if you got any questions, please jump into the comments. So let's start with some news here first. How about this? Chris, you tell everybody first where they can find your wonderful and amazing commentary.
Yeah, for college football and basketball right now, because we're in the middle of the madness of March, you can get me on Full Ride on College Sports Radio on Sirius XM channel 84. We are on 9 o'clock till noon Eastern time. Sometimes I got to think about that. I get it confused with the local time, but 9 to noon Eastern. And then if you like NASCAR, I do that once a week at 2 o'clock on Sirius XM NASCAR Radio with RFK. And
at
not
Childers
Kennedy,
Radio,
like the actual team.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
That's good.
Roush Fenway Keselowski Racing. Yes, Brad Keselowski.
That's an unfortunate acronym in 2024.
Fenway Park.
Yeah.
Roush.
Yeah,
Jack Roush. Yes.
There you go. I got
you.
you.
There you go. I'm a
all right.
walking like billboard for the team, so you can see.
That is appropriate considering the sport you were covering in that particular role. As the cars drive by,
yes,
completely covered in advertising. That's the way we do this. That's the way it works, though. So, look, I want to. There's two pieces of news I want to ask you about, and then there's sort of like a realization that I've come to, and unfortunately, it means we're not discussing like how the Arkansas offensive line is developing or how the Missouri secondary is replacing two corners. Like it's none of that stuff in spring ball anymore. And I'm going to ask you about that in a second. But first, the two pieces of news. It looks like Kaden Proctor, big 5-star offensive lineman, played at Alabama, went into the portal from Des Moines, Iowa, goes to Iowa, is like at basketball games, is hanging out at Iowa. He decides, I guess this isn't for me. And so he's going to leave Iowa and he's coming back to Alabama. Like, this is great news for Bama. And if you're Kalen DeBoer, but just like, we've seen a lot of crazy things in the portal. I don't think I've ever seen a 5-star like left tackle future NFL prospect leave one school to go to another school and then go back to another school. We haven't seen this yet.
Follow the bags of money is what it is. I mean, he left Nick Saban when Saban left, and everybody go back to the whole Nick Saban thing. So Saban says after the Rose Bowl, after the loss, that everybody came to the office and had a meeting, and a lot of the conversation was about NIL. What can you get me? And playing time. Now, I think with Kaden Proctor, certainly he wanted to know what he was going to get. And if the number wasn't appropriate, and now you had a new coach in and Kalen DeBoer, go back home. Go back to where you're comfortable. Go back to being an Iowa Hawkeye. That, to me, is what happened. So he goes home. He gets a good deal. To me, what happened, though, that now that the dust is settled, now that Kalen DeBoer is in place, now that this whole, the NIL collective has been able to sync up with the coaching staff, I think they found the money. I think essentially what they did, they gave Kaden Proctor. I'm serious. I think that's exactly what happened. I think they gave him what he wanted. So he can come back and be a part of Alabama. It's bizarre. I mean, I think we'll always cherish his time at Iowa. I mean, it was one of the historic careers.
One shining moment. It was one
shining moment. But to me, follow the money. Follow the money. Follow the bag. Now you can transfer as many times as you want with no repercussions. So no harm, no foul to him. The NCAA has no teeth whatsoever. I'm sure you've covered it ad nauseum, as we all have. It's what's weird about it? You and I have known each other in this business longer than I've known anybody. I mean, we came up together in the same business, same company, worked together. And did you ever think when we were having lunch that day when you got hired at Chili's, did you ever
I wasn't working at Chili's.
No,
you just made it sound like I got hired at Chili's.
No, so hold on. Braden was interviewing for a job with Rivals.com.
I only worked at Rafferty's, okay?
Yeah, you did work at Rafferty's. I remember that. I remember you telling me that. But Braden worked with me at Rivals, but I was the one who took him to lunch. You know how you have that like lunch hire kind of thing. We went to Chili's right down the road and had the Southwest egg rolls. And
okay, all right. You told the story last time you were on the show.
Did I?
Yes.
Anyway, then why'd you bring it up? Then listen to me. Did you not, when you go back in time to 2005, 2006, 2007, whenever the hell it was, did you ever think we would have to be so well versed in legalese and so well versed in court cases? I never, and I hate it personally. Like, I'm just like, God, because, and then really what I've discovered is how little trust I have in the legal system. Because you start to realize how corrupt it is and how, it depends on what kind of judge you have, what kind of jury you have. If the lawyer, I was a jury foreman a couple years ago for a civil case. Yeah. And I actually had a blast because it was some stupid ass money thing, with a rich guy who's a plastic surgeon. And so it was me and every other juror was a female. And they let me be the jury foreman, and it was, it was fun. Like, we hung out, it was good. It was cool to be the. I mean, nothing happened, but it was cool to be the, the only guy hanging out and doing the thing.
Did you get a verdict at least?
Oh yeah, got it.
Okay.
It was awesome. I read the verdict, the whole thing.
Okay, all right.
But it makes you realize how, like, I think when you're growing up, you want to have some sort of faith in the legal system. Like, like justice prevails and. Then you grow up and you're like, golly, it's just a bunch of a-holes and bad lawyers.
It's whoever can afford the best lawyer, that's for sure. Now,
well, I guess the NCAA pays a lot of money for their lawyers, and they get crushed all the time.
NCAA ain't played nobody. So here's what I'll say. First of all, I wasn't intending to bring up the Nick Saban commentary to Congress about what you said, like, it's every single player is just taking the bag. I actually think that's bullshit. Yeah. I love and respect Nick Saban. He's the greatest coach of all time.
Do you think Kaden Proctor's taking the bag though? Because I do.
It's absolutely, some players absolutely do.
Yeah,
and money is a factor for almost everyone. But if you're, what I've been told, and I've talked to a lot of people on the recruiting trail, both on the coaching side and on the coverage side, and that is that if you are now the going rate for like a 5-star, let's say the top 30 or 40 players in college recruiting, it's about 6 figures, which I would argue is probably what it was in 1980, in 1990, in 2000, in 2010. I would say 6 figures is about right for the number 1 quarterback prospect in America, or the number 1 defensive lineman in America, or the number 1 running back in America.
You're probably not wrong.
I'm not wrong about this.
Yeah.
And that number hasn't really changed. That number is still about 6 figures. And the offers for Kaden Proctor coming out of high school were probably about the same. Meaning today, if a 5-star comes out, I'll use Dallas as an example. A 5-star tackle comes out of Dallas. He's worth about $100,000, let's say. He's a 6-figure prospect. You're going to have Oklahoma. You're going to have Texas. You're going to have Alabama, maybe Georgia, maybe Penn State, maybe Ohio State. All of their offers are going to be about the same. Like, they're all going to be within thousands of dollars of each. One might be 110, one might be 95, one might be 105, but they're all going to kind of be about the same, which means the decision-making for players is now, and this is more on a recruiting level rather than a transfer level. So I acknowledge there has to be a difference there. The decision-making goes back to the same old shit that you and I did back in 2005 and 6 and 7, which is who's going to get me to the NFL, personal relationship with the family, who's going to coach me individually, who's going to develop my skills, what system do I best fit in? There's so many different ways that recruits used to decide things. Like, there was this little money swing for a couple of years, and now I think it's leveled out. With the transfers, I think for a player like Proctor, absolutely. Do I think every player is asking about money? Yes. Do I think it is disingenuous of Nick Saban to say that the only thing that every single player cares about is money? I think that's horseshit. I think that is inflating the issue, in my opinion.
I mean, there could be some horse shittage going on when it comes to that, but I think Saban at the end of the day reflects, how he feels and how he believes that I think he realized that he couldn't be who he was. He couldn't be Nick Saban anymore. He couldn't run a program the way that he ran a program, which is listen to me and I'll get you there. But, mind your P's and Q's. Nowadays, am I playing? Am I going to get money? Because the other guy's going to have an offer that's going to be too good for me to refuse, and I'm going to leave Alabama. And so Alabama then won't be Alabama. Nick Saban won't be Nick Saban. And I think he realized that pretty quickly. Do I believe that there's players out there that still do it for all the reasons that we used to cover? Sure, I do. But I think these major
but also
programs,
still getting paid. But they're still getting paid.
And
I
still do believe that. Like, so for example, Jerry Neuheisel is a assistant coach at UCLA. He's the son of Rick, who is my co-host on Full Ride. So he's the assistant coach that I'll, get the most information from just through Rick. And he says that it's every conversation, every parent, every one of them. It starts with, what is and at UCLA, they have a cap. And it's pretty small. Like, you'd be amazed at what they're working with.
Yeah.
It truly explains. No, and it really explains why Chip got the hell out of there, because you just can't be competitive. And it's a very, like you said, you're not surprised. Anybody that knows anything about UCLA, they are frugal to a really bad fault.
Yep.
But that's why Chip got out of there. But I think, he said that pretty much, especially like, Los Angeles, places like that, pretty much every conversation starts there. Then we can work our way into the system and the fit and the NFL and all that kind of stuff. But these guys, I mean, and the fact of the matter is the numbers aren't changing about who is or isn't going to the NFL. So if you can maximize where you're at financially in college, by all means, then I think some parents and certainly their kids are realizing that.
And I think
it's not the end all be all. No, I agree.
Right. It's not to say that Saban isn't wrong, that there aren't plenty of players that is their number one priority. That's the only thing that they care about. I don't even disagree that it's the first thing that people ask about. But my issue with Saban, and this wasn't a topic I intended to bring up, but I think it's interesting though, because I do think, Saban represents an industry that takes the bag at every turn. So I find it a little disingenuous for them to turn around and then blame the players for taking the bag, even on its face. If you cared about that, my argument is that it's not. I think it's disingenuous to say that it's the only thing that anyone cares about. Are you telling me that the fourth string guard who's like deciding between Troy and Tulane is like, well, I'm getting $450. I'm getting $480 from Tulane, but $450 from Troy. I'm going to go to Tulane. Like, no, you're going to pick the school that's best for you, and you get a little money on the side. Like, that's as long as it's in the same realm. So I just thought interesting with Proctor. Either way, huge win for Jalen Milroe and Kalen DeBoer to get their potential left tackle back on the board for Alabama. Texas A&M hires an athletic director, and I'm curious about this. I really am interested to see what you say about this, because I think Trev Alberts, who played at Nebraska, did a great job hiring Matt Rule. I think a guy that in the NFL is viewed one way, but in college is viewed a totally different way, as a pretty darn good coach. Got the hire. The athletic department at Nebraska is surging and kind of clicking on all cylinders. The volleyball team is selling out football stadiums. They're doing really well in the athletic department. Trev Alberts is the head of that. He leaves to go to Texas A&M. And I'm curious what you think about this, because Texas A&M, you got to be gangster in the SEC to be an athletic director. You got to be cutthroat. You got to be mafia. And I think Trev Alberts was perfect for Nebraska as an alumni there. I don't know if jumping up a notch, I think in pressure at Texas A&M, I'm curious if you think he is a guy that is he being promoted because he's a gangster and he's capable of taking Texas A&M's pressure and turning it into championships? Or is he being promoted because he's done a pretty good job at a place where he's pretty comfortable and probably gets longer to leash at Nebraska than he does anywhere else? What'd you make of the hire for Texas A&M?
It was surprising. It was kind of out there. I was like, where the hell did that come from? And why would Trev, with everything going on, like you said, the volleyball program selling out football stadiums, they're the best in America. The basketball program with Hoiberg is in a great position. They're in the NCAA tournament for the first time in a while. They just gave him a 2-year deal with the interim. There's a lot positive. Matt Rule seems to be absolutely going in a good direction there. And if there's anybody that I believe can fix it, it's Matt. But it was weird how the governor then came out and was like, our administration sucks and our school is a problem. And so to me, it was more about Nebraska than it was Texas A&M. I think A&M had a job opening. Ross Bjork left for, a crazy good job at Ohio State. And I absolutely think it's a better job than A&M in every capacity.
But you saw his face at the press conference though.
Oh,
He did not have his hands on the steering wheel.
No,
at Texas A&M.
No. And now he won the lottery. I mean, now he's at Ohio State, and that's a job. Think about every bell and whistle you have. Think about your geographic advantage. Think about your money advantage, your alumni, your collective, and the fact that you're in a league where if you're right, you're better than everybody in the sport that matters. You just are. If you're right, you're the best. Doesn't matter if Michigan's good or Penn State's good. Ohio State just is a better program overall. You are the number one program in the Big Ten, and I don't think we have a number one in the SEC. And certainly it's not A&M, right? You could debate it between a handful of teams. So I think for Ross it was a no-brainer. Replacing him with Trev, experienced, has made some good hires. He's a name. I mean, he's certainly somebody that we all got to be years ago. I mean, probably the younger people don't know, but he was on ESPN and did some broadcasting for college football. I think that's how I got to know who he was. And when he got the job at Nebraska, I thought it was because of that, because he was Trev Alberts, the media guy.
So this is where I'm going with this. Like Texas A&M.
Do I think he's a gangster? No, but I think I get why he took the job. No, I get why he's there. I don't understand why A&M hired him.
That's kind of where I'm at on this. And my question, and it's not that he's not capable. He might be, because again, his track record in Nebraska is that he's done a great job. But my argument is like that Trev Alberts probably got the job at Nebraska based a little bit on the fact that he was an alumni, which means maybe he wasn't fully prepared or ready or going to do great. He did an excellent job.
Famous alumni, and like a
prominent,
yeah.
So, and Bo says it. Trev said it best in his speech here. He wanted to work where there is strong leadership and unlimited potential. I agree. The problem with Texas A&M is sometimes the leadership is too strong from outside the building.
They definitely have unlimited potential, I think.
Yes. So
I don't know if they'll ever tap into it.
To be an SEC athletic director, you have to be, when I say gangster and mafia, is you have to be willing to deal with not only the fishbowl, which certainly exists at Nebraska if you're Trev Alberts, but I think there's actual reasonable expectation at Nebraska. They do not think we're going to spend $700 million every few years to win national championships, the way Texas A&M now thinks since joining the SEC. And yes, Texas A&M should be allowed to think that way because they have the resources and the recruiting base to do that. But it's never worked for a reason. And I'm just curious if this job is too tough, too big, too challenging, too much pressure. That's my only thought, is like, you didn't get an experienced gangster. You got like a nice Midwestern alumni. You know what I mean?
Yeah, you did. And like, to me, you might as well have just made R.C. Slocum the guy until he rises into the sunset, because he might not be a gangster, but at least he's got the experience and he knows the area, and damn, everybody loves him. I mean, if you've spent 2 seconds with R.C., you're like, he's one of the most genuine backwoods, like works on a ranch at his off time kind of guy. He's just a dude. He's totally, he's like Yellowstone.
And I want to be clear to Bo, who's a great listener. We talk to you guys. We talk to Bo all the time. Huge A&M fan. We completely agree that Texas A&M is a better job than Nebraska. I think it's. I don't think it's even close. I'm not even sure it's. But the difference is that the pressure and the oil money and the boosters and the walls close in a lot faster at Texas A&M than they do at Nebraska. And
I think there's a reason you've had the turnover. There's a reason Scott Woodward and Ross Bjork have kind of been in and out. They realize that. And because the expectation level is that of Texas, the expectation level is that of a major power player. The problem is the tradition's not there. You have all the money. You have the Billy Bob and Bubba guys with the belt buckles and the 10-gallon hats that have all kinds of oil money to spend. And you have it all. You just don't have the trophies. You don't have the tradition. And for whatever reason, like, I thought you were lined up. I really did. Going to the SEC, divorcing Texas, getting away from them, having Johnny Manziel, being your own man. I thought it was going to lead to this A&M revolution. And they've just been, and then they pay Jimbo Fisher out his nose. I mean, 10 years, 90-something million. It's like, okay. And they gave him a blank plaque. Fill it out. National champions. And they didn't get close.
They got close in 2020.
They finished fifth, but would they have won the title? I don't know.
No. They would not have won the national title.
The rest of the time, I mean, the Jimbo wasn't the quarterback whisperer. He wasn't the offensive wonder kid that everybody claimed that he was. And you kind of thought, like, okay, what's wrong here? What kind of mystical forces are happening behind the scenes?
All right. Well, I do think if you're going based on, which is what we do when we see coaches that are hired, we sort of have our own opinions. We have some background information. But really results in the field is what matters for coaches. Like, hey, did you win or did you lose? And a lot of times that is how we evaluate a coaching hire. Well, he had a great track record of winning or losing. With athletic directors, it's about raising money and it's about hiring people. And the NIL at Nebraska was pretty well put together.
Yeah.
He hired Matt Rule. The other athletic departments are running well. So for the time being, I think Trev Alberts gets a totally positive review. It makes total sense for him to go. My only question is, this is one of the biggest and toughest jobs in the SEC. Can you handle it? We'll see. We'll move on from there. All right. So that brings us to sort of like the main point of the episode, and I want to talk to you about, because we have sort of like three stories that are all tied together that all happened on Friday of last week through Tuesday of this week. And in my opinion, they're all tied together to the year 2028. So just remember that year, remember that date.
2028.
We're going to land on 2028 at the end of this conversation. So number one, we have the SEC and the Big Ten negotiating control over the sport, which they just did on Friday. Mm-hmm. They gave away 5 automatic bids, or I guess 3 automatic bids in theory. So there's going to be 5 automatic bids in the new playoff format as we move forward through the 6-year extension. So 2 years of 12 team this year, could be 12 or 14 next year. Who's going to control that? Now the SEC legally has control over that with the Big Ten. They give the automatic bids to the G5, to the ACC, and to the Big 12 as sort of like, here, we'll give you this. You give us control over the format and, oh, by the way, the revenue distribution, which leads us to the second big story. Second big story is the finalization of the ESPN contract, $7.8 billion, $1.3 billion for either 11 or 13 playoff games each season. That means the SEC goes from $5.5 million a year per team from the playoff contract to $21 million per year per team. The ACC only gets 13. The Big 12 and Notre Dame only get 12, and the Group of 5 only gets 1.8. So story number one, SEC negotiates control over the format. Story number 2, finalizes the money and the distribution model. Story number 3 is that the Clemson Tigers file a second lawsuit against the ACC to try to break up the grant of rights. Now, I think it's hilarious if you actually read the lawsuit. I'm not a lawyer, but like all the reasons they say that they shouldn't be like held to the grant of rights are the reasons the grant of rights is in place. So I'm a little confused about that.
Yeah.
I think like the grant of rights is keeping us from changing conferences, expanding our media contract, and competing for championships. I'm like, yeah, that was the fucking point of the grant of rights.
That's the point. Yeah.
Like,
that's why Philip or Swafford, whoever it was, made that happen. Swafford.
Right.
Yeah.
So why does this all matter to the SEC? And here's ultimately what I have been told, and I want this to start, and then we'll land.
Yeah.
The Big Ten and the SEC were threatening to leave the rest of college football like last week. And they had a television partner ready to go to pay for their separate contract, their separate playoff, their separate situation, whatever that might look like. They were ready. The threats were not veiled or it was not a bluff. They were ready to go. So that's why the other conferences gave the SEC legal control over the playoff format. I think what all of this is telling us, lawsuits in the ACC to blow up the conference, new revenue format, and control over the playoff. All of this is telling me, and I feel pretty comfortable saying this, that conference expansion for the SEC is coming so much faster than anyone realizes, Big Ten as well, and that the quotes, the look-in clauses in the contract, which is 2028, and the clauses for realignment, all of which are in the contracts for 2028, tells me that Clemson and Florida State have 4 years to negotiate their asses out of the ACC. I'm assuming North Carolina and maybe a handful of others come along. Virginia Tech, NC State,
Virginia, maybe.
Virginia, Miami, Louisville.
Yep.
Teams above the fold, right?
Yeah.
I don't know if they go Big 12. I don't know if Florida State and Clemson want to go to the SEC. I don't know if the SEC wants to defend its turf from the Big Ten. But this is telling me that I think – first of all, do you agree that all of this means that what I thought was going to happen in 2034, and then I thought it was going to happen in 2031, is now going to happen in 2028, which is the new version of college football?
Yeah, it's the 2 major conferences. We're getting an AFC and an NFC. You can look at it like Midwest versus the South, even though the Big Ten has teams all over the place. They've got the California schools, and they've got a school in Eugene, and they've got a school in Seattle, but you can kind of look at it like it's the college football version of the Civil War, if you will, with the northern teams and
I'm here for it.
Teams. Yeah, and they'll be battling it out at the end of every season. You can't blame Tony Petitti and you can't blame Greg Sankey. And I think that's the most important thing. They have a job to look out for their own conferences. Does Greg Sankey care about the greater good of the game? He does. I mean, he said it to us many times. He's been, very apparent that, he feels like he's a caretaker of the greater good, but his job is one league. His job is one conference and to put it in the best position possible. And that's what he does, right? And that's what he's done here. And Tony Petitti, who's a newcomer to this whole thing, I think is really fortunate to have somebody as savvy as Sankey to be able to negotiate this time. I mean, we wouldn't have had college football in the pandemic time without Greg Sankey. God knows where we would be right now without him. But you think of all the other leagues and all the other newcomers and their background. Sankey's really the only one with a steep entrenched college background, and he's done it in all levels, whether in the Southland Conference or whether in the SEC. So I think we're fortunate that we have somebody like that and not a former TV executive or former MGM Grand or whatever the hell, background. Like we've seen with some of these commissioners, we actually have a guy that understands college athletics. And I think that helps us as far as protecting the game. They're in power. To me, that was the best that the other leagues could do at the end of last week. You are either going to get left behind or you're going to take what they give you. I mean, it's like Oliver, right? It's like, please, give me some more, sir. Like, you're begging for straps. And if they throw anything at you, you got to eat it. You got to survive. That's where the Big 12 is. That's where the ACC is. Jim Phillips knows. I think it's a matter of time before that league dies.
Yep.
Florida State has been adamant. They've got the lawyers working at it. Clemson's working at it. All you got to do is find one judge, like we said earlier, that agrees, and we could, make it a mess, and the whole thing could go to hell. I think Florida State probably ends up in the SEC. I do, even though there could be some blocks.
So I agree, and I know we kind of chatted about this last time. Like, hey, what's the future of the perfect version of the SEC? But now I think it's really going to happen, and I think ultimately the question is:
would we want North Carolina, or do you think they would want to be in the Big Ten because of their academics? So that's what I'm curious about. Like, they're a wild card to me.
They are, because the Big Ten wants Virginia first. Now, here's what's interesting. The ESPN has vested interest in the ACC because they got them on the cheap. Like, ESPN has the ACC rights for super, super cheap. So why would they give that up? Well, here's the idea. I think if you take the best commodities in the ACC, and if ESPN knows that this legal thing is going to happen and that the ACC is going to blow up in the next couple of years, because eventually when you get enough money and enough lawyers pushing on the door, it'll eventually open. I think the way they protect their investment, if the TV markets and the TV partners are really driving all of this, ESPN's going to want to keep Florida State and Clemson, mostly those two, because they're the two biggest TV commodities.
Sure.
They're going to want to keep them on their platform, which means pushing them into the arms of the SEC or temporarily the Big 12, because they have the Big 12. But it certainly means keeping them from the Big 10, which is Fox, CBS, and NBC.
Great point.
So what I think is interesting is Virginia is the one that they're like, ESPN's like, whatever, dude, go to the Big 10.
Yeah.
Go to the Big 10. And this is what I think is interesting. If you're asking me culturally and football, what fits in the SEC, it's Virginia Tech and NC State. They fit a little bit more. Miami and North Carolina fit more in the Big 10 academically.
Yes.
Virginia, Big 10 academically. Big 10. I think Florida State and Clemson walk, talk, and act and sleep and
like
drink
SEC
and piss like SEC.
Yeah,
teams.
they're SEC schools, of course. Yeah.
So here's my question: if you're the SEC and you're Greg Sankey, are you willing to sort of like maybe you split the pie? Like there's a little less money for everybody because you're overlapping recruiting territory by acquiring Florida State and Clemson, but you're defending home turf from the Big 10 and from their arch rival television partners. Are you willing to go and help this process? Because I think it's happening in 2028 at the latest.
I think he would, because I think he understands, like he was hell-bent with the last round of expansion that geography matters. The lineage of it matters to him. He got pissed, I think, when the Big 10 went to California, because he's like, hold on a second. We expanded, but we did something that was in our footprint. We didn't go to LA. And it created this whole new kind of realm. I think that stuff matters to him. I think his league making sense matters to him and not being a hodgepodge. Those schools that we mentioned would fit in beautifully. And the thing is, like, you're talking about losing money, but they're still going to make a ton of money, right? Like, it's not like you're losing significant money that's going to, impact your bottom line. It's just, do I get a, fifth jewel on my private jet or only can afford 4 extra one?
It's an orb. It's a glowing orb.
It's first world problems and then some.
Yeah,
you know what I'm saying? Like, it's not that big of a deal.
And so
yeah.
A&M says, Bo says, A&M fits in the Big Ten academically. Yeah, so does Missouri. And then if you drive through Missouri and you realize, oh, this is an SEC state. Now, I would argue, and you and I have talked about this, I think Midwest, Northern Big Ten states and Southern states are way more alike than people realize. I think they're way more similar. There's rednecks in all of them. There's economic hardship in all of them. There's culture in all of them. Yeah. I think the difference between like Florida State and Clemson, and even I would argue NC State and Virginia Tech, is a love of football that does not exist at Wake Forest or Boston College or Syracuse.
I don't think
Virginia.
People realize how redneck the Midwest is. Like, if you're Southern, I'm not kidding. Like, if you're Southern, the state of Wisconsin may as well be called Alabama.
Yeah, we already.
I'm not kidding. Like, and no offense, I mean, it's just, it might as well be called Alabama. It's the same people. They just talk a little different.
And they care more about they care more about the Packers than they do the Wisconsin Badgers.
Yeah, but the Packers might as well be a college team, honestly. I mean, the whole ambiance of it is very college.
So here's my.
I like your stock behind you, by the way, Mr. Owner of the Packers.
Yeah, that's right. It's right there. My stock ownership certificate.
I have a big day today. My stock team that I have, Chesterfield, he get promoted to the English Football League today.
Oh,
tonight.
Today could happen. Okay,
today could happen.
I'm attempting to. We're going to London in at the end of May. My wife and I were trying to go to what's the second tier league called? The championship. Final. The championship
at Wembley.
So we're trying to go to the championship final because they call it the most expensive game in sports apparently, and so we're trying to go to Wembley State because the winner goes to the EPL. Can you imagine like the Sun Belt?
It would be the greatest thing ever. Think about the money. Think about if you're like Western Kentucky and you're playing for Jacksonville State. It'd be unbelievable.
To always take Vanderbilt's spot every other year.
Yes, but please go to that. You will love that game at Wembley. It's so special and. Like people, that's like playing basketball at Madison Square Garden. So you have to go. Yeah,
it's hard. It's very, very hard to get tickets. So my thought was, I think North Carolina is the one that could go either way, Big Ten or SEC. I think Miami and I think Virginia go to the Big Ten. I think ESPN looks at Georgia Tech and says you can have them. And I don't think Georgia Tech moves the needle, but I think if you're ESPN and you're trying to protect your product, and the ACC is blowing up, you want Florida State and Clemson to be in the SEC. I think you want Virginia Tech and NC State to be in the SEC. I think you want Oklahoma State. It doesn't expand like it's rivalry. It's the same vibe. It's the same energy. It's the same brand. They fit perfectly well. I don't know about West Virginia. They walk, talk, and act like an SEC school, but I don't know if they
are they too redneck for us. Are they almost too redneck for us? Which
they belong in Texas.
That's saying something, but.
I don't know. The point is
they're burning couches,
I think this is happening so much faster than anyone realizes. I think expansion is coming.
Oh yeah,
and that means the playoff changes, and ultimately this is what we don't know, which is what is the SEC going to do? I don't believe that the SEC should have an automatic bye. Like I don't like that part. Which they negotiated away. That was part of the negotiation. That was
ridiculous.
But. Do I think that the vast majority of the playoff is going to be SEC teams and Big Ten teams? Probably, which is
most SEC.
Well,
let's be honest.
The question is, first of all, do you like 12 or 14 as a playoff model?
I like 12. I thought 12 was the good number, but I know the Big Ten and the SEC are going to get exactly what they want.
Yeah.
So
I agree.
Everybody be comfortable with 14.
So here's what I think is fun to allow yourself to do. Because I do like 12 better than 14 because I like 4 buys.
Yeah.
And it also adds more value to championship Saturday because then you have more teams playing in more games that are more valuable. Whereas with the two team buy, which is what you'd have to do with 14 teams, like the opposite NFL, you only have 2 buys, and that's probably going to be reserved for like Georgia and Ohio State most years, the winners of the two conferences.
Sure.
So I think what's going to be interesting is like these 2 years, how do we all feel about like what is going to be a 6-week playoff marathon that for these first 2 years, the conference championship games are going to feel incredibly important and more than I expected, I think, because if you look at Georgia and Bama the last few years, some of those games that they've played where like they're playing for a bye, where that might not be the case in a 2-team bye in a 14-team playoff. So I'm really excited to see what these first 2 years look like, because I do think these 2 years are going to be like an anomaly, because then I think it's going to go to 14, and then I think we're going to have expansion in the conferences, and I think the game's going to change again. But I think
I'm kind of ready for it.
For 12,
I'm just kind of ready for us to get to the future. I'm ready to settle. I'm ready just to like, there's so many ever since the pandemic happened. And I know it wasn't the pandemic that did it. It was the ruling in the Alston case, but it all kind of happened at the same time. But ever since then, it's been a tornado. It's been like, what the hell am I covering? What am I watching? Do I like this? Do I not? Is this college athletics? What is this? I just want it to calm itself down and be its new reality and let me figure that out and start to enjoy it again. Because it really has not, if I'm being honest, the games have been fun, but covering the sport has been very anxiety filled because you just don't know what the hell's happening.
We're expanding the playoff, and we've never played a 12-team playoff.
I know.
Like, what are we doing?
It's like, well, that's like the guy transferring from Iowa. I mean, it's
right. It's exactly what it is.
It's exactly what it is. Welcome to 2024.
I will give the SEC, the Big Ten, the people in charge a lot of credit on this. They have not lied to us about this. They have not lied. They have not lied to us about why this is happening. It is about money, and it's about access. Mm-hmm. It has never been about creating the best number 1 versus number 2 matchup. The BCS did that. The playoff sometimes, most of the time, did that. This is not about that. And Bo says he likes a 16-team playoff with no buys. So here's what I like about the 12-team format. The bye week adds incentive to conference championship games because then you're playing for a spot in the bye, right? Like you're then playing for that on the final weekend or in your final month of the season. If you're playing to be ranked 5 through 8, which last year would have been, off the top of my head, Florida State, Georgia, Ohio State, and I think Oregon, maybe 5 through 8. Those teams are playing for every game. This is why I don't like the argument about devaluing the regular season. Every single game would turn into something of value because those 4 teams are playing for a home game that is worth millions of dollars to your economy and to your team and to your season ticket holders. And then the last 4 spots are teams trying to fight their ass to get into the playoff altogether, or at least the last 3, because one of them is going to go to the group of 5. So the 12-teamer for me is still significantly better than the 14, where you're just going to have sort of a wider net where you're playing for less stuff in the month of November. I feel like.
I agree. I 100% agree. But again, Tony Petitti and Greg Sankey, they want inventory. They want access. They'll get what they want, and we'll have to live with it. But I'm with you. It would make Championship Saturday awesome. And it would allow for that day to feel big and probably bigger than it does now. I mean, it would, if we made it make sense where we know exactly what every game means, like the NFL, like the NBA, like Major League Baseball, where you just kind of know, play this game and you'll get access to great rewards. And if you lose, you know them, which just is sport. I really think as a college sports fan, as much as we're tradition and bowls and things that don't make sense, we love them. Oh my. Common sense be damned. Could you imagine if we actually lived in a world of common sense in college athletics? It might be the most refreshing thing ever, but it might be the most refreshing thing. It might be like walking into a pool when it's 100 degrees outside and a, nice sip of lemonade on a steamy Nashville day. Like that's how refreshing it might be.
How many weeks? So in the NFL, I'm just thinking you've got wild card weekend, you've got divisional round, you got conference championship, and you got the Super Bowl. So you have 4 rounds of games with one extra weekend in there where they're off, right? Because the Super Bowl is 2 weeks. I don't think people have yet realized in the SEC or anywhere else in college football that we are going to start like the Sunday after the rivalry weekend, right? Like the Iron Bowl happens on Saturday, the Egg Bowl happens on Thursday, the Iron Bowl happens on Saturday. The very next Sunday, you're going to have 14 SEC teams done with their season.
Yeah.
And 2 of them are going to go to the SEC championship game.
Yes.
And starting on that Sunday, which is like generally the last Sunday in November, right? It's normally the last Sunday in November. So the Iron Bowl, the last Saturday in November, roughly, give or take. All the way through, and I think the championship game is not until like January 20-something this year coming up, 2025. You're basically going on like 7 weeks of playoffs here.
Yeah.
So I think for the casual football fan, I think it's okay to allow yourself. And here's the other thing. I'm okay with the committee messing with matchups so that we don't have like Ole Miss at Georgia in the playoffs in the first round.
You want to reseed?
No. So think about the matchups. I think we would have had Penn State at Ohio State and Ole Miss at Georgia this past year if we would have done it.
Gotcha. Yeah.
And those would have been games that we saw in the regular season. And in the Ole Miss case, that was the game that Lane Kiffin came out afterward and was like, I don't have enough 5 stars. We can't win. And they got their ass kicked.
Yeah.
I think what the committee will do, and I'm actually totally fucking fine with it, is don't let those types of games happen again and give us some new shit. Like Penn State at Georgia.
Love new shit. That would be the greatest
Penn
thing.
Penn State at Georgia.
Yes.
It's going to be great.
Sexy. That's Brett Bielema eroticism right there. That's exactly what you want.
It's not even borderline.
No, I need ice in my trousers.
Like Ole Miss and Missouri could be preseason top 10 teams this year. Tennessee could be a top 10 team this year. LSU could be a top 10 team this year. Those teams are all fighting for a potential road playoff game or a home playoff game, in which case you could see like the Missouri Tigers hosting a playoff game, like with the entire world.
Talk about ice in the trousers. Can you imagine?
That's crazy.
Oh man, my dogs love it. Hear them?
Yeah, they're excited.
Oh, they're excited.
People are excited.
MIZ, they're saying.
I think for 2 years I'm allowing myself to get very excited about what this format's going to look like. Now I agree with you. I think it's going to go immediately to 2 buys and to 14 teams, and that's what's going to happen in 26. I think we're going to have expansion by 28, and the SEC is going to be 22 teams, and we're going to have a totally new sport. But like for now, I think it is okay if you're a Tennessee fan to get excited about Nico and trying to get into a 12-team playoff, because if you get to number 8, you are hosting a playoff game at Neyland Stadium. And I still don't think I think it's the video game's going to come out and people are going to get to the end of the season and be like, what is this 12-team playoff we're playing?
Yeah. No, it's going to be, I honestly am not mentally adjusted yet.
I'm not ready.
I'm still living in the past. I'm still living in the season we just had. I'm not quite in that mode that Oklahoma and Texas are in the league right now, and that USC, UCLA, and Oregon and Washington are in the Big 12, and that Cal and Stanford are in the ACC, and the Big 12 is different, and the Pac-12 is dead. To me, we're still in normal mode, and the fact that we are going to have home playoff games next year is like, what the hell world are we living in? And how great will that be? To be able to buy a ticket to a playoff game and it's at your home stadium and tailgate, that's going to be a coolness we've never had. You only get that in the NFL, and you know what it's like. Like, think about the Packer atmosphere for a playoff game, but for all these college teams, because that's what it's going to be like. It's off the charts. I mean, you lose the sadness in the parking lot. My God. Oh, another level.
So I'm trying to give me a second here. I'm pulling up this year's schedule for the SEC weeks 13 and 14. So even like weeks 12, 13, and 14, which are the last 3 weeks of the season. And like Tennessee at Georgia is November 16th. That's 3 weeks to go in the season. There's a chance those are both teams ranked in the top 12 when they play. You've got Texas at Arkansas. You got LSU at Florida, Missouri at South Carolina. That's just week 12. Week 13, Ole Miss at Florida. That's a playoff game for Ole Miss at that point. Probably, right? Bama at Oklahoma could be a playoff game for both of them. Texas A&M at Auburn. I'm not saying A&M is going to be great this year, but is it insane to think that Texas A&M could be an 8 or 9 win team later in the year? It's possible. Missouri at Mississippi State. That's a winnable game. They're supposed to take care of business in, but like that's a road trip in the SEC to a loud environment that all of a sudden becomes incredibly important. Kentucky at Texas. Again, that's before I get to the last weekend, which of course is A&M and Texas. Obviously, the Iron Bowl. You're going to have Oklahoma, LSU. You're going to have Florida State, South Carolina, Clemson, all those regular games. But the point is, Ole Miss is going to play in the Egg Bowl. All of those, every game I just mentioned is a playoff game now for more teams. And it doesn't take any value away from the Georgia-Alabama matchup earlier in the season, because that game
makes it better. Makes the product
that game
better.
could still be for the SEC championship or for a bye week or whatever else.
Makes it deeper, makes it more interesting, we've lived in a world where it's been so top heavy and only the top heavy games matter because we're looking at a, 2-team BCS or a 4-team playoff or whatever it's been. The fact that we're actually going to have meaningful games for several teams at the end of the year, like the last week of the season, is going to be more than just about 4, 5, 6 teams. As football fans, we're gonna get to the end and be like, oh my God, this is cool.
Well, think about
cool.
And think about the moments that you and I remember covering the national product for so many years. There's all these games that are generally, and frankly, we had one in the SEC almost a couple of years ago where Georgia's going undefeated and they go on the road to Missouri. No one expected Missouri to play well in that game. They were an average football team, a 500 football team, and they make Georgia bust their ass to win that game. Those are the types of games where we would normally, like, for another team in another conference, it would destroy their season. Like Oklahoma State loses to Iowa State on the road in 2011. It's the reason Alabama and LSU rematch. There's always those types of games where you remember, we went on the road and we just couldn't. Like I did an interview with JC Sherbert, our old pal, by the way, covering South Carolina, and there was, I can't remember what year it was, where Connor Shaw and South Carolina have they win 11 games, and they're playing to be in the top tier of the BCS, but they go into Knoxville and they get smoked by Tennessee. Yep. And it's like, those are the games where, like, you don't expect it. You're on the road. You're a favorite. You're clearly very good. And either you don't show up, something crazy happens, and those are all of a sudden going to be things that knock you out of the playoff.
Yeah. And they're going to be everything. And the fan bases are going to hurt that much more or go that much crazier. I think it's only going to enhance. It's going to enhance the Tennessees, the Ole Misses, the Missouris. That mid-tier of the SEC is about to get a big bump. Huge bump.
The question is, and I've asked you this and I've asked everybody else this, and I still...
A Leslie Chow quality bump, if you will.
And this is what I meant when I said...
Chow, so cold.
When I said that at least they're not lying to us. This is the one thing, the power brokers who are making all these decisions, the one thing they're not telling us is, and they're not saying this, and I don't think anybody is saying this, although some people are trying to argue this, very few, many people are saying, I think it's the idea that Ole Miss team could win 3 games or 4 games. No one is suggesting equity at the championship level.
No, but
they are merely granting access, and I think that is important.
Maybe win a game, maybe win one.
I think you can. Absolutely, you can win a game,
which is a big deal.
Absolutely, maybe a second game.
Quite frankly, it's big. It's very bigly.
Oh God, come on, dude.
We're gonna do it very bigly.
And here's the other thing I would say for SEC fans. Stop. Here's the other thing for SEC fans that I think is sneaky to keep an eye on. And that is teams like Missouri and Ole Miss that are not middle class, but like having their sort of moment right now, right? If those teams go on the road and pull an upset on a 5 seed or a 6 seed or a 7 seed or an 8 seed, and then they go on to the next round, it's very real possibility that the 3 and the 4 seed every single year are the Big 12 and the ACC champion, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So all of a sudden, you're going to be your Ole Miss. You win 1 game, it might be even at home this year.
There. Yeah.
All of a sudden, your next matchup is
winnable.
On the road against Utah.
Winnable.
That's that's way more winnable than playing against Georgia or Ohio State.
Of course.
Yeah.
And it elevates the stature of your program. That stuff matters. It's going to be perception, and perception is going to become reality, and it's going to make. I mean, the NIL will only get stronger. The reputation only gets better, and it helps so many more schools. I'm with you. It's going to be sexy. Erotica.
I sure fucking hope they stick with 12, because I the more I'm studying this, and it's not that I haven't been on board with expansion of the playoff. I was sort of always anti-expansion of the playoff because I thought access should be the most impossible thing to do. Like, you have to be excellent to get into the playoff. But I kind of came around on, look, what's best for the sport. We need more teams paying attention for longer, more regions of the country paying attention for longer to make the sport healthier. I've come around on that. But now that I'm like come around on it, and I'm in love with the 12 team, the four buys and the 4 home games, and it fits perfectly. It works well. And now I'm like, what the fuck are we doing? 14?
Another wrench.
What are we doing?
I know.
All right. Well, it's going to happen.
It's going to be sexy. It's going to be beautiful. We're going to learn to love it. And it's going to be a whole new world. I mean, it's going to be like watching Aladdin. We're going to be Jasmine and Aladdin in that carpet.
Don't stop with that shit. I just got back from taking my kids to Disney for the first and only time in my life.
You hated it? Why did you hate it?
It was magical for my kids.
It's very magical.
For my kids.
Why not for you?
It was terrible.
Why?
It was terrible.
I love Disney.
The rides are the Guardians of the Galaxy roller coaster, spectacular.
Yeah.
The Star Wars ride, among the best like amusement park rides I've ever been on from a creativity.
Avatar?
Unbelievable. We couldn't get into Avatar. Okay, you want to know why? Because it takes 160 minutes to get in. And I do not like paying thousands of dollars and using my entire vacation time to go stand in fucking lines. I don't understand it. I don't get it. I'll never get it. I convinced my parents to help us take the kids this past spring break.
You're not doing it right. You got to tell them. No, you got to go there and tell them you have IBS or something. We never wait in the line.
Well, we did. My brother's like an expert and has like the lightning pass or whatever. So he like did all the stuff and got us into as many things as possible.
Yeah, but we always say like that we were Look, and I do. I mean, I can't stand in a line. I'll crap myself. So.
I have never I have never understood Bevo's plight more than being at Disney World. I understood what it was like to be a piece of meat, a cattle, a head of cow. I felt like I was in holding pens and in lines.
I love it.
I was pissing off my parents and on my wife and all that. I was just doing like, I was making all these noises.
I can't get enough of it. But you got to know how to do it. You got to get
Nope, we did it. We did it as well as you could possibly do it with an expert.
You got to get a DAS pass. You never went with me or Bobby Raymond. Believe me.
Do I have to like fake like a personal permanent injury to enjoy Disney? That's a reason not to go. And I say this as a Disney employee.
No, you gotta listen to me. You just tell them that you like. I always say I got irritable bowel. Yeah. I can't wait in line, and I get my walk right in.
You got irritable face syndrome.
And what you got to do? What ugly face syndrome? I have
irritable face. Oh, yeah, your face is irritable.
I have that too. But here's a suggestion for every single person who's ever going to go to Disney World.
It's terrible.
Go to the Avatar ride at the end of the night when the park is closing. Get in the line right before the park closes because now Fast Pass is closed. And if you're in line, you're going to get on. And now you're in and out in like 30 minutes.
I know.
So
here's the deal. I also did not know that it's going to be a get up at 6:15, be together at 7:15 in the lobby, be there when the gates open. My children cannot last past 5 o'clock at that point. They can't make it though. They can't make it to the end of the night. They barely made it on the first night. On the first night, they made it to the fireworks of Magic Kingdom. No, you shut your mouth when you're talking to me. It's terrible. Here's the deal. We spent thousands of dollars, went on a week-long vacation, and I got dumber, fatter, and more exhausted and poorer. That's all that happened.
Well, you won then.
No.
Dumb, fat, exhausted, and poor is the American way.
I don't disagree with that.
What's wrong with you?
My children had memories and loved it.
You're like a Lee Greenwood song right now.
That's all that matters. Oh, I don't want to talk about that guy.
I don't
want to talk about that guy. I've heard stories about what he said in the past. I think I've told you those stories. All right.
Cool.
Here's all you need to know. The SEC is now legally and officially in control of college football, along with the Big Ten, and expansion is coming faster. Be ready for it. It's happening much quicker than we expect, both in the playoff and in the conference format. So don't be surprised by 2028 if Clemson, Florida State, maybe Oklahoma State, maybe a few others are already in the conference. So it's going to happen. It's coming for us, boys. It's coming. Just wake me when don't tell me about the labor pains. Just show me the baby. You know.
I know. Please.
Otherwise,
but let's get it going. I'm ready. I'm ready to settle.
Yeah. Otherwise, let's enjoy the.
The labor pains have been exhausting. I'm exhausted.
It's fucking.
Give me the damn medicine.
You know, like they talk about like 48, 52 hour labor pains. Like, no, this is like 52 week labor pains.
I've been dilated for weeks. Get the damn thing out of me.
All right. Chris, where can everybody find you?
Doing my Lamaze for college football. At Childers Radio on Twitter and Sirius XM. College football, college NASCAR. Not college NASCAR.
College NASCAR.
Yeah, that's you. NASCAR and college football channels.
All right. Thank you guys all for hanging out and commenting. Go to the YouTube page, subscribe. We got good stuff up there. We talked about the quarterback rankings. I got quarterback battles coming for you guys. long form conversation about South Carolina, Shane Beamer going into year 4, Lenore Sellers expectations with JC Sherbert. So make sure you check that out. All kinds of good stuff over there on the YouTube page. Hit retweet, share the product, write a review on the podcast if you listen to us there. We really do appreciate all you guys. So otherwise, Chris, thanks for hanging out, man. Do appreciate you, bud.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate you. Thank you.
Thank you to Bo and everybody else in the comments, man. You guys are great. We really do appreciate it. Otherwise, thanks for listening. We'll talk to you next week.